Imagine you spend like $1 billion to build the most anticipated television show of the decade.
Right.
You have the sets, you have the legacy, you've got this massive built-in audience just waiting to throw money at their screens.
A literal guaranteed hit.
Exactly. And yet, before a single full trailer even dropped, a really vocal segment of your core fans looks at, well, a lighting decision in a single promotional photo.
Yeah.
And they declare with absolute certainty that your entire franchise is dead on arrival.
It's wild.
It is. So welcome to the deep dive. We are super thrilled to have you with us today because we are looking at this crazy landscape where the smallest aesthetic choice can trigger an existential crisis over modern storytelling.
It really is a fascinating phenomenon to watch unfold. We're essentially looking at the psychology of the adaptation purist today.
Okay.
Why does someone look at a shadowed face on a smartphone screen or, read a single quote from a showrunner about naturalism and conclude that the creators are actively trying to destroy the very source material they paid billions to acquire?
And that is the intense mission we are embarking on today. The lens we're using to examine this is the upcoming HBO television adaptation of Harry Potter.
The huge property.
Mass. And our source material for this exploration is a transcript from a very detailed, highly passionate YouTube critique by a commentator named Disparu.
Yeah, and the title of that video is pretty provocative. It's called Harry Potter and the Destruction of IPs.
Now, setting the stage here is critical, right? Because this source material isn't just about wand mechanics or set design.
No, not at all.
It is deeply embedded in the modern cultural discourse.
Right, and that brings us to an essential disclaimer for you, our listener. Before we really get into the weeds here, we need to establish the rules of engagement for this deep dive right up front.
Absolutely.
The source material we're unpacking today, it touches on some of the most highly charged cultural and political debates of our time.
Yeah, it really navigates controversies regarding casting, and it addresses the intense polarization surrounding the original author, J.K. Rowling.
And it dives headfirst into the broader cultural war concerning what is often labeled, woke Hollywood.
It is a veritable minefield.
It is, which is why our role here is very, very specific.
Right. We are not here to endorse or validate or condemn the viewpoints presented in the video. We aren't taking a side on the politics of casting, and we certainly aren't here to litigate the controversies of the author.
Exactly. Our goal is to impartially unpack the arguments presented. We are using this critique as a real-time case study to understand the structural philosophical debates tearing through the entertainment now.
Who does an intellectual property actually belong to? And how do modern creators navigate the crushing weight of a legacy fan base?
The hook of this entire critique is an underlying theory of we really want to understand the logic that makes a fan believe a studio is fundamentally hostile.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the critique doesn't begin with some grand philosophical manifesto. It begins with something almost comically mundane.
Yeah, screen brightness.
A complaint about screen brightness.
It's actually a brilliant rhetorical strategy if you think about it.
How so?
Well, the source material anchors a massive ideological critique and a completely practical, undeniable object. It introduces the promotional visual presentation of the actor playing Severus Snape, who is referred to throughout the video as Papa or Paper.
Okay.
And the opening salvo is that the lighting in these materials is fundamentally, objectively incompetent.
I'm trying to visualize this. What makes it incompetent? Are we just talking about a moody shadow, or is it something deeper?
The critique paints a very specific picture of technical failure. The commentator explains looking at these promotional images on a mobile phone, and the actor was practically invisible.
Wow. Invisible.
Yeah. He points out that on a standard phone screen, 3 out of the 4 characters presented couldn't be seen properly.
Crazy.
And even after moving to a desktop monitor and maxing out the brightness entirely, the argument is that the actor still blends completely into the background.
The descriptions used in the source are pretty evocative. The video calls him a shadow, or the negative in a photograph.
Right.
And it points out this bizarre contrast where the physical backgrounds of the shots are lit significantly better than the actual character we're supposed to be looking at.
Yeah, there's even a jab at the actor's expression, calling it duck lips or pouting.
But wait, walk me through that. Isn't Harry Potter supposed to be dark and moody?
Yeah.
Especially later on. Why is this specific lighting choice a red flag rather than just, an aesthetic preference?
Well, to understand that, we have to look at the mechanics of modern cinematography and the production pipeline.
Okay.
In filmmaking, lighting a character, especially when you have a diverse cast with different skin tones, requires a lot of intentionality.
Right.
You have to light the subject differently than the background to create separation and depth. If you don't do that, especially for a medium that is heavily consumed on heavily compressed streaming platforms,
which HBO Max definitely is.
exact, and low contrast mobile phones, The image just turns to muddy static.
So it's not just an artistic choice to make him look mysterious. It's a failure to understand the medium the audience is actually using.
Exactly. The logic here is one of cascading. The argument is that if a massive studio like HBO, an astronomical budget, cannot execute basic cinematic necessity of making a lead character visible on the devices most people use,
Then what else are they messing up?
exactly. It signals a profound lack of care that will inevitably bleed into every other aspect.
Imagine you're taking a selfie in front of the Eiffel Tower, right?
Sure.
But you focus your camera perfectly on the steel beams of the tower behind you, while leaving your own face in total, unrecognizable darkness.
Right, yeah.
If you show that to a friend, they wouldn't say, wow, what a moody artistic choice. They'd say, you don't know how to use your camera.
Exactly. The failure in basic framing indicates a failure in understanding the subject entirely.
And the source material pushes that absurdity to its logic. Right.
Oh, yeah. The creator jokes about what the actual show will look like if this technical pipeline can...
Right.
He speculates that when Snape shares a scene with Harry Potter, it's going to look like schizophrenia because Harry will just be having an intense, dramatic conversation with a disembodied voice in the dark.
That's a funny image.
Yeah.
There's also a joke in there about the budget, right? That they're going to have to increase the budget just to CGI the actor's dreadlocks into an English hairstyle.
Yeah, or use CGI just to make him visible at all. It's a funny image, but it's meant to establish a baseline of distrust for you.
Precise. If you accept the premise that the production team is technically fumbling something as basic as lighting, it becomes much easier to accept the next much larger argument.
Which is?
That they're philosophically fumbling the entire adaptation.
Right. Which brings us to the underlying disease. If the visual misstep is just a symptom, what's causing it?
According to the critique, we have to look at the writers, specifically a debate over the core values of the production.
This is where we shift from the practical mechanics of a camera to the theoretical architecture of telling.
Okay, let's get into it.
The source material pulls a quote from a creative on the show who is referred to in the video as Karen.
Karen, right.
This creative apparently discussed having initial conversations with the director and the showrunner. The stated goal of these early meetings was to decide upon the core values of their new show.
Right.
And the conclusion they reached was a desire to root the show in a concept called naturalism.
I have to stop you there because I am trying to wrap my head around it. In a vacuum, naturalism sounds great to me.
Sure.
It sounds grounded. Why is that a bad thing? What does a naturalistic Harry Potter even look like compared to the heightened magical movies we already have?
That is the crucial distinction to make. In a cinematic context, naturalism isn't just about feeling real. It's a specific stylistic choice.
Like what?
Naturalism often means flat, unstylized lighting, which we just discussed, mumbled or overlapping dialogue, rather than theatrical delivery.
Oh, interesting.
And a deliberate stripping away of heightened magical aesthetics in favor of gritty, everyday realism.
Okay, I think I get it.
Think of the difference between the sweeping, operatic fantasy of early Star Wars versus the gritty, handheld, grounded tension show like Andor.
So applying naturalism to a story about children waving wands and fighting dragons is basically trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
According to the purist perspective, absolutely. But the critique goes even deeper than the definition. The creator completely rejects the premise that this conversation about core values should even be taking place at all.
Wait, really? Why? Shouldn't every creative team decide what their show is about?
Not if you're adapting a beloved IP. To the purist, there's no conversation to be had.
Not at all.
The only acceptable answer to every question the production team could possibly have is, what does it say?
Right.
The source material is not a loose inspiration. It is an absolute architecture.
It's like you buy a historic, beautifully preserved Victorian house.
Okay, yeah.
The purist expects you to act as a custodian. You meticulously restore the original woodwork, you preserve the stained glass, and you honor the architect's original vision.
Right, you don't change it.
Exactly. But the modern showrunner acts like an unwanted renovator. They buy the Victorian house, immediately strip it down to the stud, and try to modernize its core values with, like, open concept living and brutalist concrete countertops.
That's a great analogy.
They call it naturalism, but to the people who love the house, it's just vandalism.
That hits the nail on the head. The source material views these external desires, these attempts to inject new core value in established text, as actively harmful.
And the language used is incredibly strong, right?
Yes. These external influences are called leeches or parasites onto the original.
Wow.
Parasites.
The argument is that they do nothing but hinder, oppose, and extract value from the story without adding anything to it.
And the critique contrasts this renovator mindset with what it considers the gold standard of adaptation. Peter Jackson's approach to the Lord of the Rings film. Yeah. Jackson is famously quoted as saying he had absolutely no interest in putting his own junk or his own baggage into those movies.
Right.
Jackson felt his only job, his ultimate responsibility, was to take what J.R.R. Tolkien cared about and put that on screen.
The film shouldn't be Jackson's statement to the world. It should be Tolkien's.
Exactly. And the source material claims there is a historical precedent for what happens when you ignore that.
Oh, like prior examples of adaptations going wrong.
Yes, it points to television adaptations of The Wheel of Time and the video game Halo as prior victims of this exact mentality.
Right. I've heard a lot about both of those.
The creator argues that changing the core values of a property almost inevitably leads to a fractured, alienating television show.
But wait, if the showrunners are acting as renovators, tearing out the old woodwork and bringing in their own baggage, what exactly is that new baggage? Where is it coming from?
This is where the critique gets highly specific. It argues that the new values aren't just different, they are distinctly foreign. Specifically, American values being forced onto a deeply, intrinsically British.
Oh, okay, so the source material is adamant that Harry Potter is fundamentally a British story.
Yes. It is set in a British school in the United Kingdom in the 1990s.
Right.
The argument is that its massive global appeal isn't a result of it being universally generic. It's popular because of its specific, eccentric British.
The video points out that J.K. Rowling understood this implicitly. When she sold the film rights originally, she secured two massive promises from the studio.
Right.
That the films would remain as faithful to the books as possible and that they would feature an all-British cast.
Which they did.
Exactly. The creator argues that maintaining that promise was the secret sauce to the original film's magic, and that modern Hollywood has completely forgotten how to create that kind of specific atmosphere.
And this requires a deep dive into how world building actually functions. For the purist, the statistical demographic reality of the modern UK matters significantly less than the feeling of a specific location in a era.
Okay, break that down for me.
The argument is that if you make Hogwarts diverse, but you do it in an Americanized way, driven by American social sensibilities and casting archetypes, you destroy the very thing you were trying to build.
Right.
You turn Hogwarts from a distinctly English boarding school into what the creator calls a generic London airport.
The London airport concept is a perfect encapsulation of the fear. An airport is a transient, culturally sterile space.
Yes.
It's technically located in London, but it doesn't feel like London. It feels like everywhere and nowhere all at once.
Yeah.
You can buy a plastic Big Ben keychain, but you aren't experiencing British culture.
Exactly. The critique stresses that people around the world are not simply interchangeable chess pieces that you can just drop onto a set.
Right.
Innate temperament, behavior, cultural cadence, and history inherently alter a setting. If you want a place to feel immersive, it has to be populated by people carrying the specific cultural weight of that.
It's like trying to film a gritty Western, right?
Yeah.
But casting entirely New York City taxi driver. They might be great actors, but the inherent vibe is going to completely clash with the desert set.
That's a fantastic comparison. And the source material is remarkably consistent on this front. It doesn't just apply this logic to the casting of a black actor as Snape.
It applies it to white actors too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is equally opposed to the casting of the veteran white American actor John Lithgow, referred to in the video as John Lithgow.
John Lithgow.
The video states that both actors are acidic to the immersion in the world.
I find that fascinating. It's not a critique of Lithgow's immense acting talent.
No. No, not at all.
It's the assertion that every time you hear an American cape or recognize an American theatrical sensibility, it acts as a siren reminding you that you aren't act Britain. It pulls you completely out of the illusion.
To hammer home how deeply ingrained and incompatible these cultural differences are, the creator pulls a really interesting historical.
Okay, what is it?
He references World War II training videos that were specifically made by the military to teach incoming American soldiers the differences between UK and US cultures.
Wait, why bring up a World War II video in a critique about wizards? That seems like a stretch.
Because it proves a point about social history. The video explicitly explained to American GIS that in the UK at that time, colored soldiers and white soldiers had different social dynamics, different interactions, and fewer rigid social restrictions than they did back in the deeply segregated states.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The creator uses this historical artifact to prove a broader point. You cannot simply transpose American racial history, American social dynamics, and American anxieties onto a British setting and expect the world together.
The cultures aren't just interchangeable painted backdrops. They have fundamentally different roots. But wait, I want to challenge that. Isn't the whole point of a fantasy world that it isn't real? Why does casting an American actor or changing a demographic matter so much? Can't audiences just separate the magic from reality? Why does the background interacting with the plot cause such a massive problem?
Because, according to the source material, the background doesn't just sit there. It interacts with the narrative.
How so?
If you change the people, you accidentally change the plot's history. This leads us directly to what the creator calls the adaptation snowball.
Go walk me through the mechanics of the snowball.
Yeah.
How does a single aesthetic or casting change break a narrative later on?
Let's look at how a writer's room actually functions when adapting a text. The creator points out that in the original context of the United Kingdom, the character of Severus Snape represents a very specific, entitled, privileged, often class-based demographic.
Right.
But by casting a black actor in a production that is clearly being driven by American cultural sense, you are fundamentally altering the narrative weight of every scene that character is in.
You are injecting a whole new set of cultural meanings into a text that was never designed to hold them.
Precise.
The source material walks us through exactly how this breaks down in practice, and it gets incredibly thorny. Imagine the actual scenes from the book playing out with this new casting.
It gets complicated fast.
What happens when characters in the story start using fictional in-universe slurs like mudblood? Or what happens in the later books when the story invokes imagery of people being targeted or hung from trees?
Right. Because in an American cultural context, those concepts, slurs based on bloodline, and the imagery of hanging from trees carry a massive, horrific, real-world racial baggage.
It immediately evokes the history of Jim Crow, segregation, and lynching.
Yes. But the argument is that this specific racial baggage simply didn't exist in the same way in the consciousness of 1990s Britain when the book was written.
Right. It was written as an allegory for classism and European fascism, not as a direct allegory for American racial struggle.
So if a writer's room gets to that chapter, they suddenly realize that a scene originally written to show a villain being a snub now accidentally looks like a scene about an American hate crime.
Wow. And the dissonance is so obvious that even mainstream comedy is mocking it, right?
Oh, yeah. The video notes that the television show Saturday Night Live UK did a parody sketch about this exact issue.
Oh, with the sketch?
They made jokes about how, with the new casting, the character of Harry Potter suddenly looks racist as hell for how aggressively he treats Snape.
Oh, man.
The sketch even joked about Black Snape being immediately suspected of stealing something.
That SNL sketch perfectly illustrates the mechanics of the snowball.
The theory works like this. Every single time a creator runs into something in an old text that they deem problematic by modern standards, or that becomes problematic change they made at one, have to try and fix it.
Right.
But that fix doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It has knock-on effects.
So to resolve the friction created by the first change, say, the casting, you have to rewrite a line of dialogue in episode 4.
Exactly.
That second change means a character's motivation doesn't make sense anymore, which requires a third change in episode 6.
Precise. The changes snowball until eventually the writer's room has spent so much time patching plot holes they created themselves that you are so far removed from the original story, the original tone, and the original logic.
At that point, the creator argues, you might as well not have bothered. You haven't adapted the IP. You've just worn its skin over a completely different story.
That's the crux of the art.
But here's where it gets really interesting for me. If these changes risk breaking the narrative logic so severely and create so much extra work for the writers, why do they make them in the first place?
Well, the source material argues this destruction isn't an accident.
It's not just a side effect of a clumsy writer's.
No, it claims it is a deliberate feature. The creator asserts that the creatives driving these changes have an innate disgust for traditional English culture, and they view it as a moral imperative to alter it.
That is a heavy accusation.
Well,
it suggests the creative process has been entirely subsumed by ideology.
Yes. And the source material points to a specific, prevalent philosophy driving modern Hollywood to back this up. The idea of art as act.
I hear that phrase a lot, but I really want to ground it in practical filmmaking reality. What does art as activism actually look like on a film set as opposed to just, telling a good story with a moral?
The critique uses a quote from the famous actor and director Andy Serkis, referred to in the video as Andy Serkis, to define. Serkis states that the only thing that really interests him about art is its potential to change perspectives, to open their minds, and to alter society for the better.
Honestly, for a lot of people listening, that probably sounds like a noble traditional artist. Art has always challenged society.
True. But the purist critique argues that modern art as activism functions differently. Practically speaking, it often manifests as a break in the narrative to deliver a modern political lecture.
Like breaking the fourth wall.
Effectively, yes. Instead of the theme being subtextual, a character will use modern therapy speak or deliver a monologue about a 21st century social issue that doesn't organically fit the pseudo-medieval or 1990s setting of the show.
I see.
The source material labels this approach flat out as propaganda and brainwashing.
The argument is that it's an arrogant attempt by creators to make the audience perfect. They are forcing the audience to agree with their specific ideology.
Right.
The creator believes the audience is viewed as flawed, and the art is the bitter medicine they're being force-fed to cure them.
And what does this mean for you, the listener or the fan? To explain the tragic cost of this approach, the source material contrasts this modern, literal activist mindset with the creator's own childhood experience of reading Harry Potter.
He talks about how, as a kid, he easily imagined himself at Hogwarts. He could picture himself walking the halls, fully immersed in the world, despite the fact that he did not look like the characters described in the book.
Yeah.
He had absolutely no problem identifying with people who were fundamentally different from him in race, gender, or background.
He calls this capacity abstraction. It's the audience's ability, their imaginative power, to relate to human emotions and universal experiences across physical boundaries. It's the core magic of reading fiction.
And the creator feels that modern Hollywood has completely lost faith in this concept. He points to an interview with the actor playing Snape, where the actor states that the negative comments from fans actually fuel him, making him more passionate about making the character his own.
And to the purist, the phrase making the character my own is complete heresy. The rule for adaptation is rigid and if the character becomes the actor, it is no longer the character. The actor's job is not to bend the IP to fit their own identity or their own modern world. Their job is to completely disappear.
This raises a profound question about the modern push for literal representation.
It does.
If the industry believes audiences need to see someone who looks exactly like them on screen in order to relate to a story, does that imply a fundamental loss of faith in the audience's imagination?
That's the creator's core argument.
The source material argues that by trying to force literal representation into a historical or canonical setting where it doesn't belong, you aren't inviting a new audience in. You are actively destroying the very world the audience wanted to visit in the first.
He expands on this by pointing out how this activist mindset, older property.
Like what?
He notes how modern critics will look at an 85-year-old cartoon and dismiss it as dated, or they will analyze classic fairy tales entirely through modern academic lens, viewing them purely as tales of colonization stock.
They can't just enjoy the story.
Right. They are incapable of engaging with the story on its own terms. They feel a compulsive need to interrogate and correct it.
And this ideological battle, this deep friction between the purist fan and the activist creator, doesn't stay neatly contained in the writer's room or on the soundstage.
No, it bleeds out everywhere.
It inevitably spills out into the real world, heavily impacting how these massive shows are packaged, defended, and marketed to the public.
It's inescapable.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room that is somehow even bigger than the lighting issues we started with. We have to talk about the J.K. Rowling controversy and the incredibly awkward marketing dance surrounding this show.
It is the inescapable context for this entire production. The source material notes a fundamental, undeniable paradox.
Okay, what's the paradox?
Despite years of intense drama, massive online boycotts, thousands of think pieces, the reaction to the initial teaser trailer proves that millions and millions of people are still incredibly eager to return to Hogwarts.
The demand is just astronomical.
Right, regardless of the author's person.
But the studio and the actors they hire are caught in a brutal trap. They desperately want the billions of dollars the IP generates, but they just as desperately want to distance themselves from the person who invented it.
It's an impossible tightrope walk.
So what do? How do they handle it?
The critique highlights how the actors are forced to navigate this minefield in almost every interview. Both Papa and John Lithgow are constantly fielding questions about the author.
I can imagine.
The video notes that Papa even went so far as to sign an open letter against J.K. Rowling in the past.
Wow. And here is where the source material makes a truly fascinating leap. It theorizes that the messy, controversial casting choices we've been discussing might not solely be driven by ideology.
Oh.
They might actually be a deliberate marketing shield engineered by the studio.
Wait, walk me through that logic. Why would a studio intentionally cause a controversy?
The theory is that the studio purposefully makes casting choices they know will anger the traditional purist fan. They do this because they know that progressive mainstream media outlets will immediately rush to defend those casting choices against the purist.
Interesting.
By creating a loud, messy battleground overcasting, the studio hopes to distract the media. It stops the press from writing articles claiming that there is no ethical consumption of Harry Potter because of Rowling's involvement.
It's a classic misdirection, like throwing a smoke bomb to distract from a fire.
Exactly.
But the creator points out an incredible paradox in this strategy, specifically looking at progressive media websites like the Mary Sue.
Which the video equates with the political vibe of a highly progressive city like Portland, right?
Yes. The critique claims that these specific critics absolutely hate traditionally English things, and they absolutely love the fact that the new casting choices are angering the OGs.
The controversy delights them. It gives them something to write about.
But here is the ultimate punchline of this entire marketing strategy. Despite loving the casting and despite fiercely defending the show against the Purist fan, those same progressive critics still were...
Because of J.K. Rowling?
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, J.K. Rowling's ongoing financial involvement as an executive producer is a bridge too far for them.
It's like a restaurant trying to sell a burger to a strict vegan by changing the bun to a gluten-free, ethically sourced alternative, all while keeping the massive beef patty inside.
That's hilarious and completely accurate.
You completely alienate your core audience of meat eaters who love the original bun, and the vegans still won't eat the burger because of the beef. Everyone goes home angry and hungry.
So if alienating the original fans doesn't successfully win over the modern critic, the source material asks the ultimate existential question for this entire production.
Who is this show even for?
Exactly. If both ends of the spectrum are out, what's left?
And answering that question brings us to the grand concluding theory of the video. It's an overarching philosophy of how you actually succeed in the entertainment. The creator calls it the niche theory of entertainment.
The premise of this theory is brutally simple. You must niche down.
Niche down.
You do not try to make a show for everyone. Choose a specific target demographic, and you make every single creative, technical, and casting decision exclusively to them.
Why wouldn't a studio just do that? Especially with Harry Potter, where the target demographic isn't exactly small. It is a massive, highly engaged, deeply invested base of millions of book readers. It seems like a guaranteed win.
To understand why studios don't do this, we have to look at the financial mechanics of modern. Studios are driven by boards of directors who demand infinite year-over-year growth.
Right, the corporate machine.
To get that, they believe they need a 4-quadrant hit, meaning it appeals to young, old, male, and female audiences globally. They are terrified of being niche because they mistakenly believe niche means ceiling on profit.
But the source material argues that this financial strategy is a mathematical fallacy when applied to existing IPs.
Yes.
The creator refers to adapting a beloved book as easy mode. It is literally a license to print money.
If you just follow the instructions.
Right. He points out that long-form television is the perfect medium for this. Unlike a 2-hour movie where you have to condense a massive book, a multi-season TV show gives you the time to put all the content that was cut from the original films back into the story.
You don't have to invent a single thing.
You just have to authentically represent what is already written on the page.
But, he argues, instead of taking the easy win, studios allow ego and risk aversion to take over.
Right.
They start dragging in external influences, foreign cultural values, and modern political anxieties in a doomed attempt to appease people who complain about the IP on social media, but were never actually going to watch the show anyway.
And by doing that, they rot and degrade the original vision for the people who actually care.
He expresses a profound bewilderment at the state of the industry. He finds it incredible that people like him, YouTubers sitting in their bedrooms, analyzing screen brightness, seem to be putting far more thought into the internal logic, the historical environment, and the atmosphere of a work than the highly paid Hollywood professionals who are actually in charge of it.
He draws a very hard line on professional conduct, too.
Very hard.
He argues that if a creator has a personal or political problem with an author's belief system, they should go debate that author over a cup of tea.
Yeah.
But when they walk onto a professional film set, their personal feelings are irrelevant. Their only job is to do exactly what they are told by the original text.
So for the purist, the IP is a sacred text. The creators are just temporary custodians. Their ego, their personal ideology, and their desire to fix perceived problems are nothing but static interfering with a clear...
That is the core thesis. Any deviation from the text is not an artistic interpretation. It is an act of destruction.
Exactly.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's summarize the journey we've just been on.
It's been a ride.
We started with a granular, seemingly minor technical complaint about a character's face being too dark on a smartphone.
Which led to everything else.
From there, we unpacked how that visual misstep signals a deeper philosophical debate about naturalism versus purist adaptation. We explored the intrinsic value of British culture in world building, and we mapped out the snowball effect, the idea that changing one demographic detail can accidentally fracture the narrative logic and history of an entire story.
And we followed that thread all the way up to a grand theory about the clash between art as activism and escapist imagination, ending with the bizarre marketing paradoxes that occur when a studio tries to modernize an IP while running. The underlying conclusion of the source material is that the modern Hollywood desire to expand audiences through ideological changes actively, mathematically destroys the proper purchase.
It is a relentless, uncompromising view of media. And as we wrap up, we want to leave you, our listener, with a brand new thought to mull over, building on everything we've just discussed.
If the source material is right, that modern adaptations are acting as parasites, injecting new cultural values into old stories, does true, objective adaptation even exist?
That's a huge question.
Can any creator, even Peter Jackson, truly leave all their baggage at the door? Or is every piece of media, no matter how desperately faithful it tries to be to a sacred text, ultimately just a mirror? A mirror reflecting the unconscious anxieties, politics, lighting trends, and demographics of the specific year it was filmed.
It's a question that completely reframes how you look at the next reboot or remake that pops up on your screen. Thank you so much for taking the plunge with us on this incredibly complex topic. Whether you find yourself nodding along with the purist perspective or vehemently disagreeing with such a rigid view of art, the cultural forces we've described today are undeniably shaping the future of everything we want. We'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.